Welcome to the last chapel of the school year for Lisbon Falls Christian Academy. And just want to say it's been a great year, and say hi to also all those online. We actually had a recording problem yesterday, so this is a re-recording of our chapel, which was done yesterday. Today we are going to be looking at a different lesson. It is Daniel Perkins, A Memorial Day Story. All right, and we're going to be looking at our key passages, Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. And it came to pass, when all the people were clean, passed over Jordan, that the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, Take you 12 men out of the people, out of every tribe a man, and command ye them, saying, Take you hence out of the midst of Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones, and ye carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where ye shall lodge this night. And Joshua called the 12 men whom he had prepared of the children of Israel, out of every tribe of man. And Joshua said unto them, Pass over before the ark of the Lord your God unto the midst of Jordan, and take ye up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in the time to come, saying, What mean ye by these stones? Then ye shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over Jordan, the waters of Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. We're going to be looking at Memorial Day, as you've probably figured it out. And I have long had an interest in history, American history. A few years ago, my wife gave me probably one of the most special gifts I've ever received, and it was for Father's Day. She sent me down to Virginia to visit my son, who had recently returned from Japan. And she sent me down over Memorial Weekend with my other son. And we spent the weekend down in Virginia. Well, while we were there, and I'm not even sure that she was aware of this, not too far away from where he lived at Fredericksburg, Virginia, where a battle in the Civil War was fought, and a national military cemetery is. They had what they called the illumination event. It's something I had heard about. I'd always wanted to go to. And the picture you have on the screen before you is a picture of that event. Every headstone of a soldier would have two luminaries placed on either side of the headstone. So as you look out over the field, I spent much of the day trying to get myself in the best position possible to get as many luminaries and headstones in the picture as I could, which is hard because actually the cemetery is quite large and there's a lot of trees. And this picture before you is one of the better pictures presenting just this vast sea of memorials to soldiers who mostly had lost their life during the Battle of Fredericksburg. In the summertime, I work at the Joshua Chamberlain Museum in Brunswick. It's something I've done for over 20 years. And over the years, I'd become aware of the fact that Chamberlain had issued a certificate while he was governor of Maine to Maine veterans. There are over 75,000. And the certificate was given to the veteran, or to, if the veteran had passed away, to his wife or mother or closest family member, as a thank you for their service, in a sense, acting as a memorial, as the state would relay its gratitude for the service of the Maine men who had fought during the Civil War. I managed to find one of these certificates, which you see hanging on the wall here. And this certificate, once I got it framed and I put it up, I started to think about it. And I said, I need to find out about the individual. What you see here is a close-up of the certificate, and the man's name was Daniel Dana Perkins. I don't know who Daniel Dana Perkins is, and chances are most of you probably don't. So I began a journey. If I'm going to have a certificate that was given in his memorial, I need to find out who this man is. So I began to do some research, and in a book called The History of the 1st Maine Cavalry by Edward Tobey, published in 1887, I found this Daniel Perkins mentioned. He's a machinist from the Biddeford area, born and raised. He was 29 years of age. He enlisted August 23rd, 1862. That would be the day he reported to the town, probably town hall or local center, and signed up to join the Army. He mustered in September 1st. That would be the day that he reported to training camp, which during the Civil War was one of the training camps was held in Portland. There was another one, I believe, up in Bangor area. He joined his company October 23rd, 1862. And then there's some more details, which I'll be discussing as we kind of go along. But Daniel Perkins had joined the 1st Maine Cavalry. A lot of people may not even be aware that Maine had a cavalry. This print by Mort Kunstler is not of the 1st Maine, but Maine had a cavalry unit, and the 1st Maine Cavalry had quite a reputation. And Daniel Perkins would join up in October of 1862 when he would be attached to one of the companies in the 1st Maine Cavalry. There's a lot of things that I'm still uncovering that he experienced. One of the ones, I'm just going to highlight a couple, January 20th through 24th, he participated in the Mud March. In this print also by Mort Kunstler, which is actually depicting Joshua Chamberlain participating as a lieutenant colonel of the 20th Maine. But Edward Tobey, Daniel Perkins would participate in this event. It was a horrible rainy season. We would call it the spring thaw, as the Army was trying to transport large quantities of men and equipment. The roads became just a muddy quagmire. Men became sick. Horses were, being injured in the process, et cetera. So it was a pretty bad affair, and this would be something that Daniel Perkins would participate in. July of 1863, he would participate in the battle at Gettysburg. This is a monument from one of my visits down in Gettysburg, which is to the memory of the 1st Maine Cavalry. And the individual on the stone, to some degree, has become to me a representation of Daniel Perkins. I have yet to find a picture of him. I don't know what he looked like, but this memorial kind of serves, as far as I'm concerned, is kind of a representation of who he is. So in one of the largest battles in the Civil War, Daniel Perkins would participate. July 31st in 1863, his local paper in Biddeford had an article that reported that Daniel Perkins had been wounded. He'd been shot through the leg below the knee, which would put him out of action for quite some time. Later, it is reported that he rejoined his company in November of 1863. So he had much of the summer off recovering from the bullet wound. Sadly, in January 16th of 1864, it was reported that Daniel Perkins and a few other men were captured. They were part of Company I, and they were out looking for lumber beyond a camp, and this detail had been sent out. They unfortunately were captured by some Confederate soldiers who were posing as Union soldiers in uniform. They were behind lines. and they managed to sneak in, and they grabbed a few men, including Daniel Perkins. And sometimes after January, possibly by February, Daniel would find himself at Andersonville Prison in Georgia. This photo is from a recent trip I made down to the Andersonville National Park, which also has the Andersonville National Cemetery. And this is a reproduction of what one section of the fort looked like. Daniel, along with a detail of men, would have been brought through this gate, and his life would forever change. Sadly, he would not survive Andersonville, likely dying due to illness in May of 1865. After the war was over, Decoration Day had been something that began to be a tradition in many towns across the country. There's a huge debate still over exactly how it got started. There are some accounts that the decoration of gravestones for veterans actually began during the war. This illustration from Harper's Weekly, done in June of 1868, depicts an artist's rendition of events that were taking place in cemeteries. As you see a group of ladies working on a flag, orphans in the photo on the right who are putting flowers on graves. And it should be remembered that sadly, there was a significant rise in orphans because of the war. This next picture really captures a good image. Decoration Day was something which was a family event. Men, women, children would go and decorate the graves. It was not on one specific day. It was held different times by different towns, depending upon the state or area that you lived in. In 1868, Commander-in-Chief of the Grand Army of the Republic issued what became known as General Order Number 11. He designated May 30th as being a Memorial Day, realizing a lot of towns still refer to this as Decoration Day. But this is the first time we see a unified day across the country. And I ask you to kind of remember May 30th, because we're going to refer back to that. A few papers that have been uncovered in the Library of Congress. This one, which we'll be looking at, but this particular article refers to the certificate which Governor Chamberlain, Joshua Chamberlain, would have designed and submitted to about 75,000 soldiers. The article details the design of it, who printed it. This is just a clip of it, and it goes on to discuss how it will be distributed. You'll notice that this is July 10th of 1868, so not too far after General Order Number 11 and the first May 30th celebration of the Memorial Day or Decoration Day. The Portland Press would report in May of 1869, just a few days before, just 10 days before Memorial Day or Decoration Day, that the Postmaster General had stated that the post service would be closed for that day, so families could go out and decorate the graves. You'll notice it still refers to the decoration of graves. May 26th, the same year, an article was placed stating that cars would be leaving in Market Square in Westbrook every 15 minutes in order to ensure people had transportation to the Westbrook Cemetery. What really strikes me here is this shows how widespread and popular this event was among the people. Just 4 years after the Civil War had ended, as it became necessary to ensure mass transit, if you will, was available to move people into the cemetery. This article, May 29th, the day before Decoration Day, as you see, or Memorial Day as it would become, The Post Bosworth, which was a veterans organization, was declaring that they would be participating as they would go out to various cemeteries, which are outlined in the article, and as the article states, to strew the graves of their comrades or deceased brothers in arms with flowers. This is something that still takes place, as we'll see. So we go through this. My son is in the Air Force. He's close to his 20-year retirement, and he participates every Memorial Day, going to area graves wherever he is stationed, and placing flags on veterans' graves. 1887, the town of Biddeford would erect a Civil War memorial in remembrance of the Biddeford men who had lost their lives in the Civil War. So this is, in a large way, a reminder or a memorial to Daniel Perkins. I don't know, they don't state how many they lost. Some town memorials do. Over the last few years, I've been traveling around the state. There's, if I remember correctly, it's around 140, 149. There's quite a few Civil War memorials around the state. And I'm down to, if I remember correctly, single digits as far as visiting towns from Presque Isle all the way down to York. So they're all over the state. So this one in 1887 becomes, in a way, Daniel Perkins Memorial. In 1903, the state of Maine would erect a monument in the Andersonville prison cemetery. 12,000 Union soldiers would lose their life while there, and you see just a portion of the cemetery behind the monument. Maine was a little different than many other states who erected monuments. All the other monuments would align their monuments looking at the center access road. The cemetery features a crossroad. There is a main road in and then a crossroad, and all the cemeteries or all the state memorials are facing the main access road. This one is interesting because the monument is actually faced perpendicular from the direction that all the other memorials are positioned. If this was positioned correctly, the way he was looking, he would be turned counterclockwise in one position and would be facing to the right as you look at the screen. Maine would explain in a document about the placement of the memorial that they wish that their monument and their soldier to be looking home, north towards Maine. As a note, Daniel Perkins in that photo, his grave is actually behind the memorial quite a ways. It wouldn't be visible in the picture, but quite a ways back behind the placement of the memorial. So as we kind of think about Daniel Perkins and what this certificate meant, if it wasn't for this certificate, much of what I've now uncovered, I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known who Daniel Perkins was. I would have been totally unaware of him. There's many Daniel Perkins throughout the country. So this certificate, the memorial, if you will, to his service led to me uncovering, a lot of history, in which I'm still doing. Recently in April, spring vacation, my wife and I flew to Georgia, and my son took me to Andersonville. And one of my purposes in going there was to search Daniel Perkins out. In some ways, he's almost become part of the family, if you will. I feel an attachment to Daniel. As I tried to locate him, it became necessary to find his marker, and he is simply known by his number, 1486. Walking row upon row of tombstones till I found the right row, and then once I found the right row, walking back until I found his location. Memorial Day, after I returned, I messaged my son, knowing he was going to Andersonville to place some flags. I asked him to be sure if he could do Daniel Perkins and to send me a picture of his monument decorated, and he sent me this this photograph. So this was taken just a few days ago down at Andersonville. So you might be thinking, all right, this is a chapel. We've spent a lot of times talking about Daniel Perkins. What does this have to do with the Bible? Well, if you think about our passage, we're going to be looking briefly at three things. First of all, defining memorial. What does memorial mean? Second of all, we're going to look at God's memorials. And finally, what God remembers. And so starting with defining memorials, again, if you were to stop and think about it, if you're watching this video, if you were to give a definition in your mind of what memorial means, what would you say? I like to use dictionaries around the time period in which events took place. In this case, I went before the Civil War, but I went to Webster's 1828 dictionary, and he says three things. He says a memorial is something that preserves the memory of something, or anything that serves to keep something in memory. It is a monument, is a memorial of a deceased person or an event. And also notice he says the Lord's Supper is a memorial of the death and sufferings of Christ. Webster's dictionary, 1828. If you kind of use that as a segue into scripture, notice what Paul says when he is quoting the words of Christ in 1 Corinthians. He says, and when he had given thanks, he brake it, and he said, take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. So communion, when we do things like communion, this is a very serious thing. This is something that is done in memorial of what Jesus did on the cross, his death, burial, and resurrection, and something we are commanded to remember. There's another interesting thing to think about. In Genesis 1:14, there is a word that carries the idea of remember. And if you get right down to it, that's what a memorial is. It is something that causes us to remember. And the word used for signs carries this meaning. And it says, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for seasons, and for days, and for years. So when we look at the heavens are memorial to God. And we see that in Psalms 19:1 when it says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. So with this, we have a better understanding of what a memorial is, and even more specifically in a biblical perspective. Well, what about God's memorials? There's a few verses we can look at in the scripture. We're only going to look at a couple. One is in Exodus 12:14 involving the Passover. It says, and this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generation. You should keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. And so we see here that God had established the event of the Passover, the final plague against Egypt, which would result in the release of the children of Israel and their journey to the promised land. It would be, he would declare this to be a memorial, the Passover. Then we come to the verse we looked at in Joshua, and we see in verse 6, if you remember in this passage, that Joshua had been commanded to gather stones and stack them. And when God was explaining why, he says, when the time comes, basically when your children ask their fathers in the time to come, saying, what mean ye by these stones? Think about stone memorials. What mean ye by these stones? Verse 7, it says, then ye shall answer them that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the Ark of the Covenant. And then the verse concludes, and these stones shall be a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. So once again, we see the Passover, we see the entrance into the promised land, that God established these events as memorials, something that they should never forget. Pastor and I were discussing this, and the discussion became how the location was around Gilgal, and Gilgal is mentioned quite frequently in the older books of the Old Testament, but it seems to fade away. Did they forget? what happened. We know the events of Joshua, from Joshua to Judges, just what took place in the among the children of Israel. And we can see that in our own culture. It is so easy to take a Memorial Day and not stop and think about what this day actually means. And sadly, I think we see a similar transition with the children of Israel as we move from Joshua to Judges and beyond. Verse 24, God sums this all up perfectly, that all the people of the earth might know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that ye may fear the Lord your God forever. And you could think about Genesis 1:14, creating the stars, or the deliverance of the children of Israel from Egypt, or the entrance into the promised land. And we see that this day was meant to be a day of memorial, something that the people would never forget. Well, the next thing I want to look at, or the final thing, is what does God remember? We've seen now what a memorial is. We've seen examples of memorials from the Passover, the entering into the promised land, communion, creation of stars. But what about God? Does God erect memorials? What does God remember? And let's take a look at just a couple verses. The word memorial in the King James appears 2 times. It appears, first of all, in Matthew 26:13, when a woman would use some expensive perfume or ointment to wash Jesus' feet, and she was criticized for this action. And Jesus responded, "Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also that this woman hath done be told for a memorial of her." That's pretty special. Jesus had declared that, listen, whenever we talk about the gospel, his death, burial, and resurrection, it was his desire that her story be told for a memorial to her. So God erects memorials for us due to our actions, due to our heart. Acts 10:4, we see the second mention of it, a centurion's prayer. We see as a Roman centurion, and in verse 4 it says, "And when he looked on him, he was afraid." The centurion has an angelic visitor, and the centurion said, "What is it, Lord?" And he said unto him, "Thy prayers and thine alms are come up for a memorial before God." Alms would be acts of good works, charity. But in particular, I want to focus. So he had a kind heart. He had a good, he had good actions. But I think more importantly, he was seeking God. He was praying, and that this had come up as a memorial to God, and God had declared it would be a memorial for this centurion. And if you really kind of sum this up, there's 2 interesting things. You have a Jewish woman and a Roman centurion, 2 people for the culture and the time that you would not expect that to be. The Jewish people would have figured the high priest or the Pharisees, or some prophet or something along that line, prophet, teacher, a powerful teacher. But according to the Bible, he remembered a woman because of her heart and her love for Christ, and a centurion because of his prayers. Well, if you go back to Daniel Perkins, there's one part of the story that I left out. As my son was sending me these pictures, I was going back in and I was putting them into an album, and I was reviewing some information. All of a sudden, I noticed something that I had somehow missed before, and that was the day of his death. If you remember, I asked you, remember the day, May 30th, the day that was declared to be the day of memorial, until eventually it would be changed to be the last Monday of the month. May 30th, for a time, served as Memorial Day. Well, when I looked at Daniel Perkins' records, I was saddened and shocked and touched to find that he had died in Andersonville prison May 30th, 1864. This Maine man from Biddeford, I don't know his family. I don't know if he was married. These are things I'd like to find out. Did he have children? Was his mother still living, his father? But 150 years later, 158 years later, my son is standing at his grave side after ensuring his grave had a flag. So if you think about this, if it wasn't for all the things that people in the past had done to establish a memorial for this Daniel Perkins, establish a day of remembrance, I wouldn't know who Daniel Perkins is. So if you think about the biblical perspective, there's three things we can take home from this. Memorials are designed to cause us to remember. God establishes memorials to remind us of who he is. And again, if you want to have a great Bible study, just look at various words involving memorials or remember. And finally, our actions can be a memorial or a legacy for us before God. As I challenged the students yesterday, has God noticed something about your faith, your trust, we are saved by grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. But Paul also makes it very clear that love is important, that our actions, once we have accepted Christ, we should display a Christ-like love. Christ would say, no greater love hath any man than this, than one that lays his life down for his friends. So when we think about Memorial Day, the soldiers that you see before us serve as a constant reminder of the type of life that God wishes us to serve. So I hope if you've watched this, I hope you've enjoyed our Memorial Day special. And I look forward to continuing our chapels in the fall school season of 2022-2023. Thank you for joining.